How are you, man? Thanks for doing this tonight.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm glad for this opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, why don't you? Because I always butcher your last name. Just introduce yourself, where you're from.
Yeah. I'm Franz Bruckhoff. So Franz, like San Francisco with a Z, and Bruckhoff, Bruckhoff. I'm from Germany, and I create apps.
Now you're here for WWDC, which is Apple's big app conference, app developer conference.
Mm-hmm.
What has it been like the last week, visiting and attending all the parties and the actual conference itself, which is really, I guess, is it the parties or is it the actual content?
Well, I would say,
like, seriously, what's actually valuable? Is it the parties or?
So, well, the thing is, I kind of prefer, or at least this year, I preferred not going for a WWDC ticket for the one reason, and that is I want to be free and walk around and meet up with all these great developers rather than watching these sessions, which I think are fantastic. When you watch these sessions, you gain so much insight, and the advantage of doing that is you can chat with everybody about like the hottest things, and also with the Apple engineers. But well, for this year, I didn't do that. I went to the AltConf, which is just opposite Moscow and West. It's in the fantastic Metron building and the theater, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And they live stream some of those Apple sessions, and then they also have their own. So I went there from time to time and check out what's going on there. But most of the time, for me, it was much more about networking with people, getting to know new people, people from San Francisco, companies here, but also app developers and designers from around the world. So that to me is the greatest advantage of this week. And then of course the parties are, it sounds like kind of like you go to just have fun, but in reality it's a lot about networking if you do it right.
Absolutely.
It's not about getting
it should
drunk.
absolutely.
Yeah. So the food is great, the drinks are great, it's all great. But what's really fantastic is getting into these companies, seeing their offices, talking with the local engineers, the designers, the product managers, and all these people who have these amazing startups, which some of them, or probably all of them, are in some way venture backed. And that's really cool to just to see that firsthand, because you hear about Silicon Valley when you're in Germany. It's like this distant thing over the Atlantic, where like all the great things happen, and sometimes kind of makes me depressed. Like, I gotta be there. That's where all the cool things are going on. Like all the opportunity and like the energy. When I come here, the one thing I feel is energy, positive energy. So
Silicon Valley has strong positive energy.
Incredibly strong positive energy, and I would say the one thing that really drives everyone forward here is an insane sense of optimism. Like nobody here is like depressed. Nobody looks at the past in a like bad way. It's like everybody's looking forward in a good way. They want to change the world in a really good way. That's the whole point of creating a startup, is doing great things. And these parties are a really fantastic way to kind of get close to that, to experience a little bit this energy,
Absolutely.
and talking with these people about, what they're up to.
Now let's talk a little bit about your apps, because you have created some fantastic apps, many of them. These days you've been creating apps in the relaxation or health and wellness space.
Yeah.
Can you explain what your apps do and some of the more popular ones? I mean, I think they're all like top 5, right? Or something like that.
Yeah, well, they go pretty well. So, it started out, I quit my day job in late 2008 because I really wanted to do something new, something that might have much bigger impact than the things that I were doing before. And then, when the iPhone came around and all that, I knew what I wanted, and it was mobile. So I quit that job, and then I would say until 2011, I sort of studied iOS app development. Back in the day, it was called iPhone OS, or iPhone SDK. So I did that. But then early on, I realized there is a problem. Like when you just do engineering and only that, and there is no designer, and all the designers in 2009 had better things to do than collaborate with me. They were all busy on their own projects, like other apps, most of the time. I thought that, okay, if I only do engineering, my apps are going to suck really hard. I mean, interface-wise. I saw other apps where a designer teamed up with an engineer. And then from that moment, I knew this combination, design and engineering, is so paramount for mobile. I know it's not just for the flashiness, it's for the user experience. But I couldn't find anybody. So what I did was, and this is my advice I give to everybody who is getting rejected by other people, no matter what, just do it yourself. It's all about learning new things. So I studied design for a whole year. I just stopped everything and got into design. And the funny thing is I was really afraid of having to think about things like light and shadow and color and all that stuff. And so instead of learning Photoshop first, I learned 3D graphics first, because in my imagination it was a lot easier to let the renderer do all this stuff, which in turn, later on it turned out it's not really true. It's like there are maybe 500 render settings you can tweak. So, but it was a fun experience. So I kind of morphed into this guy doing user interface research. I went a little overboard and saw okay, I want to create not just some app, I want to create the friggin' most amazing app, one that when I release it will hit #1 because it's so cool. And I didn't know anything about product design or marketing back then. And so my approach was, and this is a terrible approach, I just wanted to make a cool app. See, the problem there is with the goal, create a cool app is, what's the purpose? What's my purpose? So I had this imagination, all right, I want to do something with a wheel, or you have a wheel like an iPod. So that way, I just started out prototyping stuff, and later on I developed this ridiculous time calculator, which was all developed in
Which
3D.
was amazing, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, it was amazing,
Yeah.
dude.
The animations are crazy. The whole interface, the whole app actually was developed in 3D in such a way that Rolex could come along and say, hey, I want to acquire this thing, we will build this. I thought about the mechanics in there because I wanted to think of how this thing sounds. The idea was to create a virtual gadget. And this thing really feels like a virtual gadget. There's procedural audio going on when you rotate the wheel and stuff, and it transforms like a Transformers robot and things. But I went completely overboard with this.
And these days, if you were to do this again, what approach would you take to launching a brand new product?
Yeah, so I learned the hard way. This app sold only 200 copies. It took 2 years to engineer and design. That it's definitely necessary to bring some magic to apps, but not go overboard. And so the way I approach it these days is, the very first thing I think about is, where on the App Store, or not on the App Store, but where in the world, like where, which problems exist. And among these problems I can identify I identify problems most often by things that I experienced, but sometimes you hear is the problems others experience. I look at all these things and then I think, okay, what's the market volume for these things? Who is gonna be interested in it? How many people?
What's the user type? That kind of stuff. So
exactly.
So what I think I understand it is that you're saying is that you really sit down and do the market research. You really start to understand who the user is and start to dig in to try to determine whether they're going to pay for that app or not.
Right.
And see long-term value.
Exactly. That's very important. So it's important when you create an app to think in advance of the problem you're solving, who you're going to serve with this. And then the other thing is, are they going to be interested to buy it? Which is a whole other thing. It's often that people say, yeah, I would buy this, or I need this or that, but they're not necessarily willing to pay for it. That's a huge difference. So,
yeah.
So after that one, after this Temporalium time calculator thing, which was really hard to use, it was cool but hard to use, I created another app, which was a niche product where I did not think at all about market volume. But I got lucky. This one got featured in an Apple commercial, and it paid my rent. Was okay. Did pretty well. It's a light painting app where you extrude text, the camera captures it like a long exposure thing, and then it freezes, sort of like a hologram. Pretty cool, but again, there was no real need to get this. So it was a total gimmick. The thing is, in early 2009, there were lots of gimmicky apps, and they made a lot of money.
Made money.
Yeah,
the utility apps, the flashlight apps,
right?
Those kinds of things.
Exactly, but this doesn't fly anymore. The App Store is consolidating. There are so many apps by now that it's increasingly more about quality and really the use cases, like how valuable is it? What problem do you solve? So you know, the days where you can create some very quick and simple app, and basically like do something that's already there, just duplicate it, make it incrementally better, those days are over. Like you gotta be more and more innovative. And so the challenge, like for myself, I'm still a one-man show in some ways. Like I work with some freelancers, got some people, but most of the time, like all of the engineering, the UI design and everything, the concept and all that stuff, the marketing, which I don't do so much, I must admit, because of constraints. Those things, are incredibly hard to do as a one-man operation. So my advice there is figure out a good, because if your resources are so constrained, you're alone, then it's even more important to make sure you're working on something that's worth your time. So you don't want to work on flashy, gimmicky stuff, because what's the point, right? How does this help anybody?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about the German startup ecosystem there. Berlin's the big, ecosystem in Germany.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit. I know you live outside in Hamburg, but based on your understanding, in Hanover.
Hanover, yeah.
Hanover.
It's close to Hamburg.
It's awesome. I always mess that up.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Right. I should relocate to Hamburg anyway.
What's kind of the ecosystem like right now in Berlin?
So from what I can tell, it's incredible. Within Germany, I would say, there are these cities: Munich, then there's Hamburg, and there's Berlin. And if you're a startup, you want to be in one of those. It used to be, I believe, like Munich. Munich is probably still it's really great for fitness things, fashion stuff, I think. Hamburg is like media, I would guess, agencies. And Berlin, from my perspective, became so popular because it used to be very, very cheap, ridiculously cheap. And so the cheapest towns in Berlin kind of gained traction because startups figured, hey, why waste all our money for rent and all this stuff in those expensive cities? We could just make Berlin cool. And that's what happened. But now Berlin is getting more and more expensive. But it's right now it's a really flashy city. It's kind of, in some ways, when I'm there, it gives me memories of San Francisco.
Awesome.
Yeah. And it's really cool. Like if I had to stay in Germany, I would probably figure out how to relocate to Berlin. Prices are rising, so you got to hire a land grab right now for real estate and office space and whatnot.
Cool. So. Well, Franz, I know it's getting late, and we want to go and enjoy the city. Go and grab a glass of wine before you leave. What's your Twitter handle in case the audience out there wants to follow you and download some of your great apps?
Yeah, it's at Taptanium. So like you tap something, and then tanium like titanium.
Great. Cool, man.
Thanks, dude.
Absolutely.